the worst. Every time we start a new book, I go in thinking I'm gonna rate every chapter 1 through 5 stars, just so I know at the end how many chapters I liked, how many chapters I didn't like, and then about 2 to 3 chapters, and I forget. Unless it's a really good chapter, and then I'll like think to star it.
Haven't done it for a while.
No,
Only 9 chapters in, you could start.
I know.
And then at chapter 13, you'll forget again.
Yep. Yep. That's the vibes.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fits Happy. I'm Luke.
I'm Emma.
We're talking about chapter 9 this week, Battle. We're back with Althea.
Yeah.
To start with. So a little bit of a foreshadowing / spoiler in the chapter title here. We might have a battle on our hands with Paragon.
True. And when we get back with Althea, it's been a little bit of a time jump per usual. But interestingly, we don't get to really hear about what happened immediately after last chapter we saw her, which was when
Lavoy and Amber had that confrontation,
Yes.
and Brashen and Althea kind of had the heart-to-heart of like, what are we going to do now?
Right. So I think that's an interesting choice because at this point, everybody's kind of over the whole Amber fainting thing. We still talk about it. It's still brought up, but it feels way less urgent and less important, I guess, than at the end where we left off and it was like, oh my God, what happened to Amber?
Yeah.
And now we've been waiting all these chapters and we get back and it's kind of like, yeah, it's fine, I guess.
So Althea is walking around the ship, kind of noticing everything, how there is still, fight training going on, and it seems so orderly and so slow. She doesn't know how that's really going to help, blah, blah, blah. She kind of continues around and eventually just goes up the mast to talk with Amber.
Yeah, I thought it was really funny that Althea watching the fight training, she's like, I'm not an expert, but how could it possibly help? That's not how real battle's going to be, which is funny because you have to learn the movements before you can do them naturally.
Yeah, you want muscle memory.
Yeah, so although there's a lot to be desired with Lavoy, this is not something he's necessarily doing wrong.
Right.
I just thought it was a funny detail that Althea is so suspicious of him and like, oh, this can't possibly be of any help. Mm-hmm. But I mean, technically it is how you're supposed to train, I'm pretty sure.
And at the beginning of this chapter, again, we have a comment from her that her feelings for Brashen have been running warmer as of lately. She's not going to tempt herself with private conferences with him to talk about this fight training and stuff like that. If he could control himself, then so could she. It was merely a matter of respect. So she climbs up the mast and heads to talk to Amber. Amber heard her coming. She always seemed preternaturally aware of folk around her. Althea saw the carpenter's resigned smile of welcome as she hauled herself over the lip of the platform and sat down beside her, legs dangling. How do you feel? She greeted Amber. Fine. Will you stop worrying? I'm over it. I've told you, this ailment comes and it goes. It's not serious. Althea was not sure she believed her. She still wondered what had happened that night when she had found Amber unconscious on the deck. The carpenter claimed that she simply passed out, and that the bruises on her face came from striking the deck. Althea could think of no reason she would lie. Surely if Lavoy had struck her down, either Amber or Paragon would have complained of it by now. And she studies Amber's face and notices that it has a very healthy glow, and in fact the skin beneath from the peeling skin from her sickness was tanned even more, and it made her eyes seem darker and her hair more tawny.
The peeling skin from the sickness, we know it's from the sickness, but Althea thinks it's from windburn.
Right.
From being up in the crow's nest. Yeah. She doesn't believe that this sickness is a thing, I guess.
That it's a normal thing that she goes through.
Exactly. But as rereaders and potentially first-time readers, we know this is the fool
Mm-hmm.
changing or beloved changing because the path has been followed. I guess first time readers wouldn't know that, but they would know that this is beloved.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the path has been achieved in some capacity.
Althea's been staring at Amber for a little bit, and Amber kind of is embarrassed and is like, there's nothing to see. So Althea is like, oh no, I was gazing at the coastline.
Uh-huh.
There's a bunch of water out there, but you never know. Pirates love to hide in these waters.
I do want to ask, why do you think Beloved's so uncomfortable with being stared at in this moment?
Privacy in general, I think. Just like, why are you staring at me and not saying anything? That's enough to make anybody uncomfortable.
Okay. Yeah. I was thinking potentially it could also be because of Time is the Fool, where people stared and were mean, I'm sure,
Yeah.
at Buckkeep. But yeah, I don't know. Just a thought.
Mm-hmm. So Althea says, pirates love these waters. A ship can lie low and wait for her prey to come into sight. With all the little coves and inlets, a pirate might be lurking anywhere. Over there, for instance, Amber lifted an arm and pointed. Althea asks, you saw something? I thought I did, for an instant, the tip of a mast moving behind the trees on that point. Althea stares and says, there's nothing there. Probably just a bird.
Which we know is actually a ship that Amber saw. So a little frustrating that Althea so casually is like, it's probably nothing. It's fine.
I mean, she stares over there for a while too.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I just thought that was like a little frustrating. Obviously, the plot must go on, but I was like, come on, Althea. You literally just talked about how pirates would love to hide in all these places. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So Althea is kind of gazing out over the land, thinking about how beautiful the land looks and how you can see the true contours of everything and colors of things, and thinking about the pirate isles in general and how they're impossible to chart because, some streams kind of fill with silt and then maybe a big storm will wash it all away. And so you can never really chart it out and plan where you're going. So it's very, very hard to sail through these islands and these lands. So that's why you usually always sail around.
Right. It is mentioned that the color of the water specifically lets you know how deep the water is. And so the reason that Amber is up there at all is because she needs to be watching the depths to make sure that they're not going to hit a sandbar, which is the second most dangerous thing about the Pirate Isles besides the pirates, is running ashore with a ship. So that's also like a cool little fact. I don't know if that's true. I have not Googled it, but
well, you can kind of see that in water around us too.
Yeah, definitely.
Different shades.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting to think about the shades actually meaning something and not just being a cool thing that water does. So, yeah. And it also gives purpose for Amber being there, not just getting her away from Lavoy. It's not like she actually is doing a job here.
Yeah. So she thinks about her father at the end. Basically, it never profits to go into the Pirate Isles, so he always went around. And Amber asks her what she's thinking about, and she replies, my father, and Amber thinks it's good that she can think of her father and smile at this point. After a little bit of silence, after that, Althea has to ask the question, are you sure Lavoy did nothing to you? Amber sighed. Why would I lie to you? I don't know. Why would you answer my question with another question? Amber faced her squarely. Why can't you accept that I was feeling sick and collapsed? If it had been anything other than that, do you think Paragon would have kept silent about it all this time? Althea did not immediately reply. Then she said, I don't know. Paragon seems to be changing lately. It used to annoy me when he was sulky or melodramatic. He seemed like a neglected boy to me then. Yet there were times when he was eager to please. He spoke of proving himself to me and Brashen. But lately, when he talks with me at all, he says shocking things. He brings up pirates, and all he talks of is blood, violence, and killing. Torture he has seen. He says it all in such a way that is like dealing with a braggart child who deliberately lies to shock me. I cannot even decide how much of it I believe. Does he think I will be impressed with how much cruelty he has witnessed? When I challenge him, he agrees such things are horrendous, but he relates those stories with such salacious glee. It is as if there is a violent and cruel man hiding within him, relishing what he is capable of doing. I don't know where all the viciousness is coming from. He glanced away from Amber and added quietly, but I don't like how much time he spends with Lavoy. You could more correctly say how much time Lavoy spends with him. Paragon can scarcely seek out the mate. The man comes to him, Althea, and truly Lavoy brings out the worst in Paragon. So a bit there.
Yeah, I have a question for you. Do you think that the salacious glee that Althea is sensing from Ygritte, or sorry, spoilers,
Gave away your thought there.
From Paragon is from like Ygritte's memories or other pirates that have died on his deck, or is this just Paragon?
I mean, like I've said before, I think that Paragon in my mind is always just Paragon. He is influenced by those memories. So it's just Paragon to me.
Okay.
Now, there are some parts where I think like his dragon selves kind of push themselves more up to the forefronts. But yeah, I think this is just egged on by Lavoy's stories.
Okay.
And just bringing out that former pirate side and that viciousness. What about you?
Yeah, I was wondering, I don't know, it just felt like, especially the heavy-handed comment of there's an evil man inside of Paragon. I was wondering if maybe that was Robin Hobb's little nod at like Ygritte lives on, because Ygritte would have died on the deck, or well, not deck, but on Paragon, right?
I don't remember. Maybe.
So my thought was potentially a little bit of Ygritte is in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And
unless he didn't bleed.
True. But you don't have to bleed
But
to
you're
be absorbed.
bonded.
Oh.
If you blood is like the true thing.
Okay.
Because like Ephron got absorbed basically because he was bonded to the ship, right? He's part of the family.
I guess. Well, he was
But no
on
one,
Wizardwood and was holding Wizardwood.
yeah, but no one else really fades away when they die on board a ship, you know?
Yeah, I guess. Good point. Okay, never mind then.
But it is Paragon. He was damaged, so maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, he's definitely going to have memories from all of those pirates.
Right. And I was wondering too if talking about it sort of brings those memories to the surface, which is why it would feel like he was a little bit more evil and, I don't know, relishing
maybe.
it because those are the memories. And I thought that it was kind of funny to use the term there's an evil man inside of him, because we know as rereaders that a lot of Kennet is inside of Paragon, because Paragon's holding on to that. And so it's kind of funny to think like there's an evil man inside him and it's Kennet.
True.
So either way, just an interesting thought.
Before we talk more about Lavoy, let's back up a little bit and kind of finish our conversation from a few chapters ago. Do you think Lavoy punched Amber?
Ooh. I feel like potentially. It's hard to believe that nothing happened. And I mean, maybe you could get a bruise by falling and like fainting or whatever. And I feel
you definitely can.
Yeah, like absolutely. But I feel as though potentially what has happened is Amber did faint and pass out, but before she like fell to the ground, Lavoy took a swing or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like Amber wasn't conscious of it happening, but it could have happened. And the reason Amber thinks it didn't happen is because Paragon didn't say anything. But I also feel like Paragon is in the pocket of Lavoy and wouldn't necessarily be as upset as he would have been like a year ago for something happening to Amber. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe not. Maybe not at all, because Paragon would say something. I don't know. What
Pretty
about you?
sure when Fitz speaks up and speaks to Beloved about this encounter, doesn't he mention something about like a man was hurting you or something like that?
Mm,
So I pushed him away. So I don't know.
yeah.
I'm I don't know why Amber would lie about it
Yeah.
because she wants Lavoy gone.
Right.
So I'm on the fence.
But I don't know. But that could explain why she would pretend like it didn't happen because
To not
Paragon,
influence anything?
that potentially. And also, I think Paragon not saying anything.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, I don't know.
She
And
doesn't want to be the reason that Lavoy is away.
could be, yeah.
She doesn't want to step in,
I
be
don't know.
her own catalyst. I don't know. Anyway, they do. Althea does bring up Lavoy there and how, and Amber replies, they both dislike how much time Lavoy is spending with Paragon and what sort of stories that Lavoy is feeding Paragon. They vie in the telling of such stories, violent fantasies, as if witnessing cruelty were a measure of manhood. For his own ends, I fear. There is little that can be done about that, Althea says, a bit uncomfortable at the direction of this conversation. Isn't there? Amber gave her a sideways glance. Brashen could forbid it. Not without undermining Lavoy's command of the ship. The men would see it as a rebuke to him, and then let them. It is my experience that when a man in command of other men starts to go rotten, it is best to expel him as soon as possible. Althea, think. The ship is not subtle. Paragon says what is in his mind. The sailors are wiser than that, but if Lavoy is influencing the ship to his way of thinking, can you imagine he is doing less with the crew, especially the tattooed? Lavoy has gained far too much influence over them. They are, in some ways, like Paragon. They have been brutalized by life, and the experience has left them capable of cold cruelty. Lavoy builds on that in men. Look how he encourages the crew to deride and torment Lop. Lavoy is a danger. We should be rid of him. But Lavoy, Althea began, and then she was interrupted by Amber, springing to her feet and yelling, "Ship."
So before we get to the ship, I'm kind of team Amber on this. Like, what's Brashen doing in all this? And I think it's a really thin excuse on Althea's part and Brashen's, because we know Brashen feels the same way, that it'd be undermining Lavoy, so Brashen can't step in. If Lavoy is wrong, you should undermine him. Otherwise, it looks like he has the stamp of approval. And I feel like it makes Brashen look weaker that he doesn't do anything to stand up to Lavoy. He just continues to let Lavoy do whatever he wants. And so it like makes me really mad that both Althea and Brashen say that this is like the paragon of good leadership.
Nice word choice,
Thank you.
considering. Yes.
Thank you. And it's not. It just isn't. Ignoring things going poorly is not good leadership. It's actually the opposite, in my opinion. And this whole thing gets me really heated. And I am just really heated about this whole chapter, but this especially, this topic.
Well, there is a ship, and it's pirates, Althea confirms and yells down, and the crew is alerted, and there is a red flag with a black emblem on it unfurled from the other ship, and some small boats that are launched from that bigger pirate ship. Althea can kind of confirm that these small ships are going to try to harry and harass and guide Paragon to sand, beach them where they can take them over.
Right.
So Althea is shouting down to Brashen, who appeared at the first shout, and says, "Put on sail, they're trying to wolf pack us, but we can outrun them. 6 small boats and a mothership. Be wary, there are shallows ahead." She tells Amber to go down to Paragon and tell him he must aid us to keep him in the best channel. If the pirates start to get close to us, arm him. He could do a lot to drive back a small boat. I'm going to keep the watch here. The captain will run the deck. So Amber flows down and doesn't ask questions or anything, just goes immediately to Paragon.
Right. And Althea does talk a little bit here about how at first her first feeling is being scared that it's scary to see pirates coming at them. Even though she expected this and knew this would happen eventually, it just feels too real. But she also sort of shakes off that feeling because there isn't time to be scared right now. It's going to happen. And so you have to just be prepared. And I found that really interesting to have this little aside of this isn't Althea, I feel like is usually pretty headstrong and brave and doesn't really have a lot of moments where she seems shaken. I guess like there are moments, but they feel a little bit more rare. And so to have this be something that she's like, oh my gosh, this is scary, I think makes the tension feel more real because even Althea is like, oh, this is not good.
And she's not even the one who becomes more brave at the end.
Yeah.
She's just shaken and kind of overtaken by Paragon's feeling.
Yeah.
She looks down and sees a frenzied activity on the deck, and it's not as orderly as she could hope for. But she feels a rush of anticipation that kind of, distracts her a bit. The excitement was giddying, submerging her fear. After all the waiting, her chance had finally come. She would fight and she would kill. All of them would see what she could do. They would have to respect her after this. Oh, Paragon, she whispered to herself as she realized abruptly the source of her feelings. Oh, ship, you have nothing to prove to anyone. Don't let this become you. He was aware of her thoughts. He gave no sign of it. Almost, she was glad to cloak her fear in his bravado. As she called down to Brashen the locations of the oncoming boats that he might steer to avoid them, Paragon was shouting for their blood. Amber had not armed him yet. He roared his threats and thrashed mightily, blindingly flailing his arms as he sought for prey within his reach. As Althea watched from her rocking perch, 2 of the small boats slackened their efforts at the sight and sound of the infuriated figurehead. The other 4 came on unchecked. The men also wore red kerchiefs with a black sigil on their brows. We know this as Kennet's men. They're wearing the black raven.
Yes.
But they don't know this until the men get on their deck.
Right. And I think it's only from
Brashen's
point of view. Yeah. So I don't know if Althea ever realizes until later when Brashen tells her, or, it's, I don't know, maybe.
Probably not, yeah.
So I think that's also a fun little detail. And she notes that most of the people are slaves, that they have the tattoos on their faces.
Yeah. So Althea is terrified of this upcoming fight. She doesn't want to kill. She doesn't want to fight. We've had this thought from her before about, I could do it in defense of someone, but to just kill somebody is kind of wild. And then Paragon is overriding all of that, like, well, it's my chance. I'm going to kill everybody, and then they'll respect me.
Yeah, and I think that's a really pointed thought from Paragon, and something to be watching out for, and really gives us a hint to the sort of conversations that Lavoy has with Paragon. We see more at the end of the chapter in depth Paragon's thoughts, but especially this feeling of now they have to respect me kind of gives off the vibes of Lavoy being like, oh, they just don't respect you, and if you could kill people, they'd respect you, which
yeah,
but whatever.
To finish up this point of view for now, Althea is noting that the steerman's efforts and Brashen's orders to steer clear of all these people are kind of being thwarted by Paragon's rocking and his kind of striving towards these boats. From her perch, Althea heard Amber's voice raised clearly once. I decide, she declared emphatically to someone. So that's a little hint that Lavoy is probably saying, give him his weapon.
Yes. And interestingly, we go back in time as we switch over to Brashen's point of view.
It's not really back in time, I don't think.
Yeah, because it ends with him, it doesn't end, but at one point, Brashen hears the I decide.
Okay.
So this is back before.
A couple minutes before.
Yeah,
sure.
So not days or anything. But yeah, it's just interesting to me that we have a very clear, distinct time difference happening.
A marker to kind of match up the timelines. So from Brashen's point of view, he's also kind of disappointed in how disciplined, or the lack thereof, his crew is, because they're all kind of scrambling around, looking like people with their chickens with their heads cut off.
Right.
There's nothing really going on orderly. The men should be in position by now, but they're just scrambling and fighting over weapons, and some of them aren't even doing anything, and some of them are just yelling curses over the side.
And also, Lavoy is nowhere to be seen. He
Yep.
should be leading, and
Mhm.
he's just missing. And there's no time to go searching for him to tell him to do his job, so Brashen just does the job.
Yes. He abandoned the distance a captain kept from his crew. Half on the wheel seemed to be the only man focused on his task. Brashen moved swiftly about the deck. A well-aimed kick broke up one of the group of gawkers. "To your posts," he snapped at them. "Paragon," he bellowed, "straighten yourself." 5 steps carried him to where the men were pawing through the arms. The 2 squabblers he seized by their collars, knocked their heads together, and then armed them both with less desirable blades. The sword they had fought over he kept for himself. He glanced about. "Jack, you're in charge of passing out weapons. 1 to a man, and if anyone doesn't take what he's offered, he does without. The rest of you, get in line." So he deliberately decides to put aside, "I'm the aloof captain overseeing everything. I need to be in the thick of it, breaking people up and getting people in line because Lavoy isn't around."
Right.
So he does that, and he's starting to get people around. And it's still not as orderly, but at least they have some direction and some discipline.
Yeah, and mostly they're listening. It doesn't seem like anybody's grumbling or not snapping to attention when the captain's by, which is a good sign, I guess. But also, again, frustrating that Brashen even has to do it because it shouldn't be his job to do this. He's supposed to be overseeing other things.
Mm-hmm. Brashen looks around, and judging by all the shouts and the distances and things, he thinks he can evade all of the smaller boats, but just barely. And as for the larger one, well, the same winds fill both of their sails, and he's on a live ship, so he should be able to evade everything.
Right.
Yet for all of that, the ship's responses lagged, as if Paragon resisted the crew's efforts to speed him along. Dread uncoiled inside Brashen. If Paragon did not pick up speed, the smaller boats would close with him. In a matter of minutes, Brashen had the ship's deck crew working smoothly. As the chaos subsided, he glanced about for Lavoy. Where was the man whose job he'd been doing? He spotted Lavoy heading for the foredeck. Even more unnerving than the previous disorder was the small, orderly group of men around Lavoy. Composed mostly of the former slaves they had smuggled out of Bingtown, this group flanked the first mate as if they were his personal escort. They carried both bows and swords. They ranged themselves on the foredeck. Purpose was in Lavoy's stride as he paced it. Brashen felt an irrational flash of anger. The way the men moved around Lavoy told all. This was Lavoy's elite crew. They answered to him, not Brashen. As Brashen crossed the deck to go to him, he felt a little hand drag his cloak back, and Clef is sitting there. He's like, "No, just watch him for a second."
Yeah, which is kind of too insightful for Clef.
Yeah.
I mean, not that Clef's not a smart boy, but he is a boy. And so it's odd that he, of all people, would be like, "No, let's just see what happens."
But he also says that he's going to watch his back,
Yeah.
Brashen's back. So Clef is shadowing Brashen pretty much the whole time in this chapter. So they head over towards Paragon, and Paragon is yelling, "Come here, I'll kill you all, come closer." He's shouting that gleefully at the pirates in the small boats. His voice was deeper and hoarser than Brashen had ever heard it. If not for the volume of the words, he would not have known it was his ship. He felt Paragon's bloodlust himself for an instant. A boy's wild determination to prove himself spiked with a man's drive to crush any who opposed him. It chilled him, and his spine grew colder as he heard Lavoy's wild shout of laughter. Was Lavoy unknowingly feeding off Paragon's wild emotions? And the mate goads the ship on more. "You bet we will, laddie. I'll cry you where to strike, and you knock them. Give them his staff, woman. Let him show these rogues what a Bingtown live ship can do. I decide." Amber's voice was not sharp, but the pitch of it made it carry. So that's the marker there.
Yes.
That kind of lines up those points of view. And we have everyone kind of being caught up in Paragon's bloodlust.
Yeah. Everybody can feel it, and the tinge of wanting to prove himself is very strong.
Yes. Brashen thought he heard an edge of fear in Amber's voice. Basically, when she's saying, like, I decide, the captain decided me to do this, and right now we're ordered to flee. So,
Right. And I think it's really smart of Amber to bring up what their orders are.
yeah.
Because I think that shows that she's learning the lingo, maybe, of the ship of like, hey, you're not the captain. And our actual captain said we're fleeing, not fighting.
And also, it's not directly placing her against Lavoy. Even though it is, it shifts a little bit of the blame or responsibility over to someone else. So it's not just,
I don't want to.
Yeah.
It's, hey, captain said no.
Exactly.
And so I think that's kind of big and shows growth. Well, maybe not growth, I don't know, but shows, some
a
learning.
tempering of her ego.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But I don't know. So I thought that was a really interesting stance for Amber to take.
Yeah. And Amber is turning to Paragon saying, like, no one has to die. We can still outrun them, please. And Paragon's like, give me my staff. I'll kill the bastards. I'll kill them all.
Yeah. Yeah, Paragon is out for blood. He doesn't want to flee. He's with Lavoy. He's Team Lavoy here.
And Amber says, Paragon, do you truly want blood on your decks again? Give it to him, Lavoy urged. Don't try to hide a whole ship behind your skirts, woman. Let him fight if he wants to. We don't need to run.
It's really annoying that Lavoy is doing this. And it's clear that Lavoy is a lot smarter than I think he's given credit, because that's a really good way to frame this so that it undermines Amber's plea with Paragon, so that even if Paragon was going to be swayed, now the side of Paragon that wants to prove himself will...
It's like, oh, you're hiding behind a woman then?
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, a little scared little boy hiding behind mommy's skirts. Like, I think it's...
very manipulative, and it's like
yeah,
exactly what Paragon needs to hear to goad him.
Exactly.
More.
So I think it just really goes to show that Lavoy is a lot smarter than he appears, and he knows exactly how to manipulate situations without coming across as though he is doing that or that he's making decisions, I guess. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as we keep going, because it's really easy to forget that aspect of Lavoy, that he is a master manipulator, because he seems so dumb and like just a...
I don't think he seems dumb. I think he's just presented as a brute, and we associate brutes with dumbness,
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean. Like, he's the way probably Althea thinks of him,
right,
is that he's undereducated. Mean, dumb man. And he's not as dumb as he seems.
No, I mean, there is a reason that Brashen made him first mate.
True. Too bad he can't. Again, another person who has talents that could be used for good, but instead used for power grabbing.
Paragon's answer is interrupted because there's a call for boarders, and it's in the rear right-hand side of the ship. So Brashen puts steel into his voice as he swiftly mounted the foredeck, and he just starts directing then. Okay, Lavoy, get aft, repel those boarders. Archers, to the railing and hold the boats off. Paragon, answer the helm with no wallowing. Are you a ship or a raft? I want us out of here. There was the tiniest pause before Lavoy answered, Aye, sir, and he moved aft to obey. Brashen could not see what glance passed between Amber and Lavoy as he passed her, but he marked the white pinch of Amber's lips. Her clenched hands tightened on the weapon she had shaped for the ship. He wondered what she would have done if Lavoy had tried to take it. Brashen stored the incident in his mind to deal with later. He stepped up to the railing, leaned over it to shout at the figurehead. Paragon, stop thrashing about and sail. I'd rather put these vermin behind us than fight them. I won't flee, Paragon declared wildly. His voice went boyish and broke on the words. Only cowards run. There's no glory in running from a fight. Too late to run, Clough's excited voice piped from behind. They've caught us, sir.
Again, another little glimpse into things that Lavoy has been filling Paragon's head with, I'm sure. Because what do you mean cowards don't? Cowards flee, and like he's no coward. Yeah. It just isn't great, and clearly is working. I don't know. I just hate it so much because it's really annoying. It's like, well, actually, it's not that big of a deal. It's better to run than kill people unnecessarily, but what do I know?
Half a dozen boarders had already gained the decks in 2 places. They were practiced fighters, and they held their formation, keeping a clear place behind them for their fellows swarming up the grappling lines. For now, the invaders sought only to defend the small gain they had made, and they did it very well. Brashen's inexperienced fighters got in one another's way as they attacked as a mob. Even as he watched, another grapple fell to the deck, slid, and caught. So there are a ton, and there's another person climbing up the grapple, and he sees a man's hand immediately, and no one else has noticed it besides him and Clef, really.
But it appears somebody else has noticed because as he goes towards the new threat, Althea gets there first. And it is much to Brashen's dismay.
Yeah, he shouts to Amber, make Paragon see reason, get him clear of this. And he springs away to follow Clef, but to his dismay, Althea was there before him. As the boy darted his knife at the man trying to come over the railing, Althea tugged vainly at the grappling hook. The 3-tined hook was set well into the railing, and the weight of the men swarming up the line attached to it only encouraged the metal to bite deeper into the wood. A shot of chain fastened directly behind the hook prevented the defenders from simply cutting the hook free. Before Brashen could reach them, Clef gave a wild scream and thrust frenziedly with his knife. It bit deeply into the throat of the grinning pirate who had just thrown an arm over the railing. The blood gouted dark red, spouting past the man's beard to drench both Clef and Althea before spattering onto the deck. A deep shout from Paragon told Brashen the ship had felt it. The dying man fell backward. Brashen heard the impact as he crashed heavily in a small boat below. Cries told him the falling body had done damage. Brashen shouldered Althea aside. "Stay safe," he ordered her. "Get back." He swung one leg over the railing and locked the other through it, so he straddled it firmly. He thrust down with his sword, slashing the face of a pirate who still clung to the line. Fortune had favored them. The falling man had near swamped the boat below and knocked down the man who had been bracing the line. As the second pirate lost his grip and fell, Brashen saw his chance. He sprang back to the deck and jerked the grapple loose. With a triumphant cry, he threw it down into the sea. He spun about, grinning, expecting Althea and Clef to share his victory. Instead, Althea's face was twisted with anger. Clef still stood numbly at the knife in his hands and the blood that coated them. A shout from aft turned his head. The fight was not going well there. "Think later, boy. Come on now." So they have a little fight. He tells Althea to stay safe in the middle of a battle, and then rushes off towards the back of the boat, of the ship.
Yeah. And I don't know, we'll talk more in depth about it from Althea's point of view.
Yeah.
But since we're in Brashen's point of view, I'll talk on that. I get that in his mind, he cares about Althea a lot, and he just doesn't think and says, "Stay safe."
Because he wants her to stay safe.
Right. But he doesn't say that to Clef. He didn't say that to Amber. He didn't say that to Paragon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
He doesn't love them.
Yeah, okay.
But also, he has to, at some point, he has to trust her to know her job, right?
Yeah.
I get that. And that's what Althea's issue with this is.
Yes.
And why she's so angry.
Which he doesn't get. He's clueless. He's like, huh? What happened? Why is she upset that I took over what she was doing? I don't get it. But he does turn from the situation because there is more to do. And they are in the middle of a battle. This isn't the time to hash things out, figure out what's wrong. And so he goes and he says he felt a moment of relief that Althea had not followed him as he plunged into the battle.
The ship also suddenly picks up some speed. So Paragon is not flagging behind anymore.
Right.
I guess the blood on his deck's kind of jolted in, like, maybe I don't want all of this.
Right.
Maybe I should keep going. 3 of his men were down, rolling and punching with a pirate as if this were a tavern brawl. He sprang past them to engage the blade of a tattooed man with a gleaming bald pate. Brashen let the man parry his blade easily so that he could lunge past him and spear his true target, the pirate who was just flinging a leg over the railing. So Brashen rushes past and pays for it because he also gets cut, as he tries to desperately dodge out of the way. But that move did break their kind of defensive hold and allows the rest of the men to, swarm a bit and break up the defense that the boarders had.
Right.
Clef kind of rushes in behind him as well, trying to defend Brashen here as he's rushing past everybody. But turns into a general melee, which is more on the Brashen's crew's side because they're not really disciplined fighters, so a big melee is good for them. And aloft, the men were yelling that the pirate ship was falling behind as Paragon found his speed. A quick dash to the left side showed him that Lavoy and his men seemed to have handled their share of the attackers. 2 of his crew were down, but still moving. 3 of the pirates were still on Paragon's deck, but their comrades below in the boat were shouting at them to jump, to give it up. Shouts from the bow alerted him to another boarding party. He'd have to trust that Lavoy could finish aft. Brashen raced forward with Clef still at his heels. 6 men had gained Paragon's deck. For the first time, Brashen clearly saw the black sigil on their red headscarves. It was a spread-winged bird. A raven? Kenneth's sign? So there are calls from below still saying, like, give it up. Captain's flagging us back. We can head back. And Althea was in front of the 6 pirates there, menacing them with a sword. Brashen swore under his breath. At least she'd had the good sense not to close with them. Amber was nearby, holding a blade competently, if not aggressively, and Lop, of all people, was backing Althea with a staff. One of the pirates that is on there saying, now, we can still take the ship. Look who they sent against us. It's just women. Just us 6 can take this whole ship. It's fine. Right. We don't need to back yet. And Brashen kind of deduces that he's obviously the leader of this boarding party, so he's trying to rally everybody here. And Amber is saying, go now. You can't win here. Your friends have abandoned you. Don't die trying to take a ship you can never hold. Flee now while you can. Even if you kill us, you can't hold a live ship against his will. He'll kill you. You lie. Kenneth took a live ship and he lives still, one of the men declared. A wild roar of laughter broke out from the figurehead. The boarders on the deck could not see Paragon, but they could hear him and feel the deck rock as he thrashed his arms wildly back and forth. Take me, he challenged them. Oh, do come aboard, my little fishes. Come and find your deaths in me. The ship's madness was like a wave in the air, like a scent that could not be snorted away. It touched them all with clammy hands. Althea blanched, and Amber looked sickened. The crazy grin faded from Lop's face like running paint, leaving only madness in his eyes. I'm gone, one of the boarders declared. In a breath, he had stepped over the railing and slid away down the rope. Another followed without a word. Now there's 4 left, and all of a sudden, they all flee except for that leader. He turns towards the rope, but Althea advances on him suddenly, her blade challenging his. On the deck, Althea suddenly declared, we keep this one to ask him what he knows of Kenneth. Amber, throw the grappling hook over. Lop, help me hold him. And Lop's idea of holding him was swinging his staff very hard at his head. It almost hits Amber as well. And he goes down and Lop dances and says, I got him. Hey, I got one.
Right.
So Althea does notice that it's Kenneth before.
Yeah. I disagree. I think because the man said, you lie, Kenneth has one. Okay. Yeah. The guy said Kenneth's name. I don't necessarily know that she recognized the sigil.
Makes sense.
Potentially she could have.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, so Paragon is still in a bloodlust. Even if he's fleeing now, he's still kind of in his madness.
Yeah.
And the mention of Kenneth is probably
not helped.
Not helped at all. Yeah. And Lop hits this one really hard, and he doesn't end up making it.
No, he does die. And Lop is now jumping up and down saying, I got him. Hey, I got one. Which is just,
it's Lop.
Like not the time. Not what you were asked to do. Also not the time. But all right. So.
And we switch over to Althea's point of view, where we get to talk about the stay safe.
Yes, because now the battle is over, things are cleaning up, and she's still thinking about those 2 little words.
Mm-hmm.
The words were like barbs set in Althea's mind. Even as she moved through the routine tasks aimed at restoring order and calm to the deck, the words rankled bitterly in her soul. Despite all, Brashen still considered her a vulnerable female to be kept out of harm's way. Stay safe, he had told her, And then he had taken her task for himself, jerking loose the grapple that had defied her lesser strength, humiliating her by showing her that she was, despite all her efforts, unreliable, incompetent, and Clef had witnessed it all. So that is her feelings on what has happened.
This is why I'm frustrated with Althea. Is
Yeah.
that she just goes so overboard of like, obviously he hates me and thinks I'm incompetent and needs to keep me precious.
Okay, to be fair, I'm Team Althea. I agree that like this was a bad move on Brashen's part, and although he may not think of it to the, she's obviously pushing it a little bit further, and he probably doesn't realize he thinks of her as lesser or like incapable. He clearly does because his actions say that, right? Like he's treating her differently than he's treating all of the other people on board. He doesn't trust her to be able to take care of herself in this situation.
That's not true. It's not true. If you love somebody, you don't want them to see them get hurt. Even if you think they're capable of doing it, you don't want that chance. So you'll throw yourself in front of it.
Right. Okay. Yes, love, but also, I don't know, I'm Team Althea in this, in that like the way he goes about it undermines her. And they're like, you can be worried about somebody's safety and not want to see them get hurt and try to step in the way. But at this moment, nobody was attacking her. I mean, there were people coming up, but like she wasn't in a battle where there's blood about to be shed. You know what I mean? He stepped in the way of that ever even being a possibility and took over what she was doing. And I can see why in her mind she would take that as, oh, so I'm incompetent. I'm not able to do this. I'm just a weak little woman. And I think especially because that is what she's been told all this time, right? Like it's not just,
right.
This isn't just a thought that she's having out of nowhere. This is something she was told by Kyle, how she felt on the ship whenever she tried to prove, hey, I am a seaworthy captain.
Yeah.
Where she realized she's not as good as she thought she was. I think it is just her biggest insecurity that she isn't as strong as the men on board. And so then to have a person that she really likes kind of solidify that thought by taking over a task that she had in hand, I get it.
Yeah, but that's not all Brashen's fault. That's her own things fueling a lot of that.
I guess, yeah.
You know, Brashen didn't act... It wasn't good of him just to say, stay safe, you know, and like keep her out of it, because it's a battle on a ship. They have nowhere to go. She's gonna have to fight. You know, that's kind of what they planned. But like the whole thing of like, oh, he took over my task, humiliating me in front of everybody, showing that I'm incompetent. Like that's her own insecurities fueling an anger that she is directing at Brashen because she doesn't know where else to put it.
Okay. And I will say, I think Althea doesn't realize that the reason he was able to easily take the hook off the ship is because there was nobody on the line anymore.
After
like
he killed the other guy. Yeah.
So like the reason he so easily tugged it out wasn't because he's so much stronger than her and he was showing off. It literally is because there was no more weight on the line to keep it held down. And obviously she's never experienced grappling hooks before, and I think Brashen has. So she didn't know that, and she doesn't have that context.
Right.
She just thinks she tried really hard to get this off, and then Brashen comes over and does it easily to prove that she's inferior. And so like
my question is, like with that scenario right there, my question is, what would she want him to do? Just move past, oh, she's got it, and then she struggles and with her inferior strength never get it out?
No, I
think that's where like some of this anger that she's directing at him is really getting me kind of like, oh, come on, Althea. Like, yeah, it was kind of bad, and yes, it hits you right in your insecurity, but like, it wasn't that bad. You don't need to hate him as almost as much as Kyle in this moment, which she mentions.
Yeah, you're right. But I think in her head, and maybe mine too, it would have been a better move if he would have waited until she said she needed help. instead of push her aside to take over the task she was actively doing. Like, he doesn't just step around her. He like goes in front of her and does what she was trying. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
but
it's not.
like in the middle of a battle, you're just gonna like wait patiently.
No, but
Like I don't know.
I'm just saying the way he went about it wasn't very polite. And obviously, I'm trying to look, it's a battle. It is a battle, and people are trying to move fast and not going.
It happened within 10 seconds.
Yeah. Like, clearly, we all wish that battles went differently, Like, I don't know, not that I've ever been in a battle, but but I think in this moment, the frustration is once again Brashen not treating her as an equal. And this is something that Althea literally deals with all of the time, is being treated as less than because she's a girl. And so in this moment where she wants somebody to have her back, not do it for her, like, he could have assisted her. He could have helped her. Instead of push her aside and did it for her. And I think that's the difference. Like, why didn't he say, let me get this or something? I don't know, just communicate.
Yeah. But it's, again, like, a lot of that is from her own insecurities, because he didn't push her aside and do that because she's a girl.
Right.
He pushed her aside and did that because he loves her.
Right. But she doesn't.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, it's her insecurities kind of rearing up and finding a target
right
in the moment. And yes, it fits all the little bullet points here. Brashen didn't do it perfectly, but
I mean, yeah, it's about, but I would say this is why she doesn't like, oh my gosh, I already forgot his name. Greg Tanira, because she saw that he would never treat her like she was his equal. She would always be a woman first and foremost. And I think
all those conversations like, oh, Brashen never does this to me.
Exactly. And so I think that's what makes it hurt more, is that she thinks that Brashen sees her as an equal. And though Brashen's reason for doing this is from a love point of view, she doesn't know that. And so from her point of view, it's just another guy in her life doing something because she can't do it, because they see her as a woman to protect, not someone that's their equal. And I think even though it's coming from a place of love, and of course you don't want to ever see your loved one get hurt, it does signify a little bit lack of thinking that they're competent. Like, in my opinion, it does. Like, I'm Team Althea, that it does feel like he doesn't trust her to be able to hold her own. He needs to be the knight in shining armor, which I think is his own thing, where he doesn't feel worthy of Althea. And so he like keeps doing things to try to like be worthy without thinking of it like that. But I think that's why he does the actions. Now I'm psychoanalyzing a person that isn't even real, but like, it feels like he's trying to be the knight to prove his worth to her, but that's not what she wants, because she wants to feel like she's on the same level.
I don't know. A lot of it just makes me feel she's blaming him for things that he didn't do or feel, because we get points of view, right? And she kind of continues on here. The last time she felt such anger, Kyle had been at the root of it. She could scarcely believe that Brashen had stung her in just the same way. For an instant, she leaned her forehead against the thrumming line and shut her eyes. She had thought that Brashen respected her more, that he cared for her. Now this. It made it all the more bitter that she had carefully preserved her distance from him, standing apart from him when she desired to be close to him, to prove herself independent and strong. She had assumed that they remained at arm's length to preserve discipline on the ship. Could it be that he simply saw her as a distraction, an amusement to set aside while they were underway? All was denied to her. She could not present herself as a woman who desired him, nor as a shipmate who deserved his respect. What then was she to him? Baggage? An unwanted responsibility? When they were attacked, he had not treated her as a comrade who could aid him, but as someone he must protect while attempting to defend his ship. This is why I'm frustrated with Althea as well. And I know it's because she's young. She's still immature, but it's very close to an incident that made her angry, that, as we talked about, touches on her deepest insecurities and her deepest wants and desires. But she talks about, I thought he cared for me, but then he pushed me aside as if I was a thing to protect. What does that make me? Like, okay, Althea.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some misplaced anger. And
a little bit of lack of logic, but like I said, it's right after a battle. It's right
Yeah.
after all this thing. Like
Emotions are high.
I don't blame her for feeling angry or anything. I just think it's a lot of it's misplaced, and none of it is communicated.
Yeah. Well, they don't communicate to each other ever, so are we surprised?
Right.
I don't know. I don't think that there's a lack of logic in it. I think I just really see where she's coming from, and I get this feels like a self-pity party that she's throwing, but trying to make Brashen the reason she feels this way. Like it is more about her feeling like she didn't do as best as she could, and she's feeling bad that she couldn't prove herself in this moment for whatever that means to her.
Yeah, and she kind of talks about that too here, that Bingtown and all that was safe and noble had been left more than leagues behind her. This was a new life now. If she was going to survive in this world, she needed to feel competent and strong, not protected and vulnerable. The lecturing voice inside her suddenly was stilled as she came face to face with the truth. This was why her anger at Brashen raged so hot. When he had acknowledged her weakness, he had forced her to see it as well. His words had eaten at her self-confidence like serpent spittle. Her makeshift courage, her stubborn will to fight and act as if she were the physical equal of the men challenging her, had been dissolved away. Even at the last, it had been Lop who took down her man for her. Lop, little more than a half-wit, was still more valuable than she was during a fight, simply because of his size and brawn. So yeah, a lot of pity party here. And a lot of stuff that I thought we had already covered and she had already kind of squared away within herself is brought up again here. Like the fact like, oh, I am physically as strong as men. I thought we already covered that when she was on the Reaper, where she like learned that she wasn't, but she just had to work harder, and she got around it and it worked, but she still acknowledged that she wasn't a physical match for 95% of the men on board. But then it's brought up here again as like a point of like, oh, he forced me to confront that I'm not as strong as men. I don't know. It just, some of it just seems like it's a little bit of a slide backwards.
I don't know. I don't see it necessarily as a slide backwards. I think that it goes back to it being Brashen that pointed out her flaws, because when it's somebody you care about, because again, she does care about Brashen.
Yeah. It hurts all the more.
Yeah, it hurts more. It feels like it to her feels like it makes her even lesser than, because the one person she thought was on her side and believed in her doesn't. And so then
according to her,
so then it's like, oh my gosh. And according to Brashen too, because he's all, oh, unfortunately Althea's here, and she is at least she's not following me into battle, and blah blah blah. Like, he doesn't want her to fight at all, and he doesn't think she should be going into the fights. And I get that you think that it's because he doesn't want to see her hurt, but it's also got its that, like, it can't just be that he doesn't want to see her hurt. That's not just a I want her safe. That's a I don't want to see her in battle, because she definitely wouldn't come away unscathed. I don't know.
That's your own thing too, going in there. There's nothing in the text about that.
I guess. Sure. But I feel like you're putting your viewpoint on it too. Like, he doesn't say, I don't want to see her hurt.
True. That's fair.
So I don't know. I think it's really interesting to see how we both read it so differently. And it's 100% because of the life experiences we're bringing into it, right? Like,
right.
I've obviously been an Althea in my life where I've felt like, as a woman, I've been put down for that or whatever, like I'm lesser than. And so I feel the undertone that may or may not be there of Brashen's, oh, she can't handle it because she's a girl. And you, because you haven't had that experience, don't look into it that way. You're seeing it more as this loving action that he's taking from a good place.
I've also had a lot of experiences with people putting their own issues into words and blaming other people for them. So yeah. And that is an important point to, like, that is something that I think Althea especially struggles with, making up her mind of what people mean and not asking for clarification. She just jumps to conclusions. So I think you're right in that, but it's, I don't know. I think that's a mark of a good book that we both walk away
feeling
Yeah.
different things and have different experiences with it. So
Well, that's why reading a book is so unique to everybody.
yeah, it's like a fun little choose your own adventure.
It's like, oh, that's trauma I can relate to. That's cool.
Well, it's just so funny to me because before we started recording earlier today, I said, "Oh, this chapter made me so mad," and you said, "Who made you mad?" And I said, "Oh, Brashen," and you were like, "What?" Althea made me mad, and so it's really funny that we both read this chapter and got mad, but at completely different people. I don't know, just.
And look, yeah, I'm frustrated with Brashen too. Like, I totally agree. He shouldn't stay safe. But like,
Right. It's
heat of the moment thing. Like, I can forgive that, you know?
Yeah. And I want to say I am also frustrated with Althea. I think she is being overly dramatic. I just have sympathy for her because I see where it's coming. Not that I'm saying you don't, but I just see where she's coming from, and I get the thought process and the spiraling and into the self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. It is misplaced anger towards Brashen. Like, it's easier to blame him because she cares about him.
Yeah.
To be like, it's his fault that I feel this way.
Well, Jack walks up to her after this ruminating and says, "Captain wants to see you about the prisoner." It was hard to look up at Jack's self-assured face. At the moment, Althea would have given near anything to have the larger woman's size and strength. "Prisoner? I thought we had several." "When Lop swings that staff, he means business." The man never awoke. "The men Lavoy was guarding tried to go over the side. 2 made it, and 1 died on the deck. But 1 fellow survived. The captain intends to question him and wants you to be there." "I'll go now. How did you fare during the boarding?" And Jack comments that Captain had her passing out the weapons because I think he could see I was keeping my head better than some of the others. I didn't have much of a chance to use a blade, though. "Maybe next time," Althea promised her dryly. The tall woman gave her a puzzled glance as if she had rebuked her, but Althea only asked, "Where are they? In the captain's chamber?" "No, on the foredeck. Near the figurehead. What is he thinking?" So Jack wanted to fight a little bit, and Althea's like, good for you.
Because it's like, okay, obviously Jack's going to be good at this too. Yet another person who is just blessed with being good at things that Althea thought she could do and she can't.
Also, I liked Jack's comment of like, "Oh, the captain put me in charge of something," because he could see I had my head straight.
Right.
Just trying to like, oh, the captain notices me.
Yeah. Even in this moment, Jack is like, see, he looks my way.
What hands he has during holding his sword. You think he went and cleaned him right away?
I love Jack so much. Also, I love that we have 2 very different women in this scenario. I don't know. Just, I love Jack so much.
And also, okay, so this next scene also, the first paragraph made me very frustrated with Althea.
Okay.
So she goes up to the foredeck, and as she drew near, she was displeased to see Brashen, Amber, and Lavoy already gathered with the prisoner. She felt slighted. Had Brashen sent for the others before her? She tried to push her anger and jealousy away, but they seemed to have taken root. She spoke not a word as she mounted to the foredeck.
Okay, yeah, it is.
This is
a little
Lavoy's
immature.
prisoner, first of all. Lavoy's prisoner, so he's the one who brought the prisoner. Amber was already at the foredeck talking to Paragon, and Brashen's the one who sent for her, the captain. So, like, she was the only one not there. Yeah, she was the last one, but by happenstance.
Right, yeah. I mean, she's just her.
She's stoking her embers. Yeah,
she is.
I know.
She has to stay mad. I think Althea, another habit of Althea's is once she's decided she's mad at somebody.
Oh, she's staying mad. She's mad.
She's going to use any excuse. She's going to read into things that aren't there to make herself more mad. And then she'll just pretend it never happened and not apologize about it. So,
yeah. What a great person.
She's a strong, independent woman, Luke.
Apparently not. No one thinks so.
No one, not even herself.
So we have this prisoner here. He had been pummeled and throttled when he was taken, but other than several bruises and swelling, he did not seem much harmed. Several slave tattoos crawled over his cheek. He had a thick thatch of wild brown hair that his red kerchief could not tame. His eyes looked both frightened and defiant. His wrists were bound behind him, his ankles chained together. He was sitting on the deck. Brashen stood over him, Lavoy at his shoulder. Amber, her lips pinched tight, stood back from the group. She did not hide her disapproval. And some of the crew were kind of loitering on the main deck to watch the interrogation, and Clef was among them. Only 2 of the tattooed crewmen were there. Their faces were stoic, their eyes cold. "Tell us about Kennet," Brashen asks. The prisoner doesn't say anything, and Lavoy says, "Let me have a go, Captain." Brashen did not forbid it, so Lavoy grabs his hair and forces him to meet his gaze and just, warns him, like, "You're going to be useful to us. You're going to talk to us. Or you can go over the side. What is it?" And the prisoner's like, "Well, I'm going to die either way." So
Right.
Lavoy's like, "Well, then you better talk to us beforehand. Maybe we'll make it quick."
And also, if you know you're going to die, at least nobody will know that you talked. You're dead either way.
Yeah. "Where's this Kennet?"
Wait, it's going to happen again.
"Where's this Kennet? That's all we want to know. That's his emblem you're wearing. You got to know where he docks." Althea shot Brashen an incredulous look. There was substantially more that she wanted to know. Had any of Vivacia's crew survived? How fared Vivacia? Were there any hopes of ransoming her? But Brashen spoke not a word. The bound man shook his head. Lavoy slapped him, not hard, but the open-handed cuff was enough to knock the prisoner over. Before he could right himself, Lavoy seized him by the hair and dragged him back to his sitting position. "I didn't hear you." "Are you going to?" Amber began fiercely, but Brashen cut her off with an abrupt, "Enough!" Brashen advanced. "Talk to us. Tell us what we need to know, and maybe you don't have to die." So it's a back and forth of like, "Prisoner, I'd rather die than betray Kennet, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to talk." And Paragon speaks up and says, "If he'd rather die, I can assist him with that." The malice in it raised the hair on the back of Althea's neck. "Throw him to me, Lavoy. He'll talk before I give him to the sea." "Enough," Althea heard herself echo Brashen's word, and then advances on the prisoner. "I'm not asking you to be disloyal to Kennet." "What do you think you're doing?" Lavoy began in disgust, but Brashen cut him off. "Step back, Lavoy. This is Althea's right." "Her right?" The first mate was both incredulous and furious.
Okay, why, though?
Probably because he sees it as like, oh, it's the first mate's right to do it, right? And she's the second mate.
But he knows that it's about her family ship.
I know, but it's Lavoy. He's probably not thinking of that. It's just like, this is undermining me in front of the crew kind of thing. Like, don't stop me from doing my thing.
Well, boo-hoo.
I know.
I guess I'm very unsympathetic
But
to Lavoy.
also, Lavoy wanted to get rid of the prisoners, as we learn later. So maybe he doesn't want anybody else questioning.
But why does he want to get rid of it? I don't remember the reasoning.
I don't remember either.
Okay. Well, anyway, he just wants to know where Kennet is and is mad that it's Althea's right to question. Mm-hmm. But Althea is ignoring everybody and gets down to the eye level of the boy and says, "Tell me about the live ship Kennet took, Vivacia." For a time, the man just looked at her. Then his nostrils narrowed and the skin around his mouth pinched white. "I know who you are," he spat out the words. "You've the look of the priest boy. You could be his twin." He turned his head and spat on the deck. "You're a damn haven. I tell you nothing." "I am a vestrit, not a damn haven," Althea replied indignantly. "And the Vivacia is our family ship. You spoke of Wintro, my nephew. He lives, then?" Wintro, that was his name. The man's eyes glinted fiercely. "I hope he is dead. He deserves death, and not a swift one. Oh, he pretended to kindness, bringing us buckets of salt water and a rag, crawling amongst the filthy hold as if he was one of us. But it was all an act. All the time, he was the captain's son. Many of the slaves said we should be grateful to him that he had done for us what he could, and that when we did break loose, it was because of him. But I think he was a damn spy all along. Otherwise, how could he have looked at us and left us chained down there that long? You tell me that." And Althea realizes that this was one of the slaves that was chained up on Vivacia.
"I was a slave on your family ship, yes. You know that. Don't tell me you don't recognize your own family's tattoo." Unwillingly, she studied his face. The last tattoo on his cheek was a clenched fist. That would suit Kyle. Althea took a breath and spoke softly. I own no slaves. Neither did my father. He brought me up to believe slavery was wrong. There is no Vestrit tattoo. There are no Vestrit slaves. What was done to you was done by Kyle Haven, not my family. Slide away from it, right? Like your little priest boy. He had to know what was being done to us. He talks about how Torg went down and assaulted the women there, and if they died, well, they were left there.
Right.
And how Torg tortured a lot of them and was just absolutely brutal.
And yeah, this is not necessarily, it's a little bit of a shock, I guess,
Yeah.
how brutal he was, but it's not that big of a shock because, as we all remember Torg is
Yeah.
horrible and was terrible. But it's also kind of sad for Wintrow that was happening, and these slaves think that he knew all along that was
Right.
happening,
Yeah.
because I think it really explains a lot of the animosity
Mhm.
that happened after the freedom of the slaves from the ship
Right. Yeah.
that Wintrow wasn't
Yeah.
understanding.
He was the captain's son. He was
Yeah.
complicit in the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, we know that he was as much a slave as they were,
Mhm.
clearly, because he literally has a slave tattoo, but also because of the way his father treated him. Like, he was getting treated better than the slaves, but only just. It was not a big margin. And he was helping them out of kindness. Like, if he had unlocked them, what was the end to that sort of thought process? And I get, like, obviously slavery is bad, but what was he supposed to do? He's just a kid.
Right.
And so it's hard because these people endured real trauma and horrible, horrible conditions, made even worse by Torg.
Yeah.
So I get their point of view too. And we get the missing puzzle piece of why they couldn't just, like, he was nice to them, just forgive him.
Right.
There was a lot more going on.
Because in their mind, it's just another psychological game.
Yeah.
Playing with their emotions, maybe getting some hopes up and then finding out, oh no.
And maybe he was cleaning them so that Torg could have his way
Right.
with them. And, like, maybe he was complicit in that. And we know he wasn't. But how do you tell that to somebody who is chained up in the hold of the ship and have them believe you,
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's really sad to know just how bad things were, because just when you thought it couldn't be worse, it was.
The prisoner finishes saying that it should have been you, or should have been one of you down there, to Althea, and Brashen threatens him, like, don't speak to her like that or I'll throw you overboard myself. And Althea says, like, I don't care. I understand why he says it. Just let him talk. What Kyle Haven did with our family ship was wrong. I acknowledge that. I want Vivacia back, and when I get her, no man will ever be a slave on her. That's all. Tell us where we can find Kennet. We'll ransom the ship back. That's all I want. Just the ship, and those of her crew that still live. Damn few of those. He seemed to sense her vulnerability and continues to speak and be eager to hurt her, saying most of them were dead before Kennet even stepped aboard. I done 2 of them myself. It was a fine day when he came aboard. His men spent quite a time pitching bodies to the serpents, and oh, didn't the ship scream while they did it.
I do want to talk about this a little. This is really hard, and I think this is a really interesting morality question that gets grappled with in these books, because to what extent is Althea guilty in this? You know
Same
what I
thing
mean?
that Ronica grappled with, right?
Exactly. And does it matter if she didn't have a say because it's her family money, it's her family ship that did these horrible things happened on, her family member that did a lot of these things and okayed it? Like, I think it's just such an interesting thing that is all the way through, because it is such a gray area. And
it's still talked about today, even.
Yeah.
People who consume products of, like chocolate and things like
Right.
that, some of those products are made with basically slave labor
right.
nowadays. Are you complicit in that if you're
Right.
funding that, that trade?
Right.
So it's a moral dilemma that's kind of followed not even just capitalism, but all economics
Yeah.
and governments.
And it's really hard to know the answer, right? Because obviously it's really easy to say slavery is bad. I don't agree with slavery.
Right.
But then, like, what actions are you taking towards that? And, like, does it matter in the end? And how much right does this slave have to hurting Althea because he was hurt by her family member? Like, does that make it okay that he's lashing out at her, even though she wasn't even on the ship? You know what I mean? Like,
And she thinks about it here, saying she was not a haven, but the ship was her family ship. Family money had paid for the slaves, and her father's crew had been the ones to chain them up in the dark. What she felt was not guilt. Guilt was reserved for her own wrongdoing. Instead, she felt a terrible responsibility. She should have stayed and fought Kyle to the bitter end. She should never have let Vivacia depart Bingtown on such a dirty errand.
and I think it's good that she's not taking on the guilt for herself, because she's right. It wasn't her choice to buy slaves. It wasn't her decisions that made that happen. But I also like that she's still owning up to her part in it.
Right.
And that she does feel like she has a sense of responsibility to this issue. And I think that's really important. And I think that's something that Wintrow struggles with too. And more so because he was on the ship.
Yeah.
But just having this whole dilemma of at what point, like, what part of the responsibility do you take? And are you guilty too? And I think that's, I don't know. I just think it's really done well here, because, like, we do like Althea, right? She's one of the main characters. She's a protagonist. So obviously we don't want Althea to get hurt, but then also, is she complicit? And it makes us think about the extra steps of that, right? Like, she's not absolved from this just because she's a protagonist. It's not just swept away. And this tattooed boy doesn't absolve her of the crimes because she wasn't there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that's a really interesting way to go about it. Hard thing to write about, though.
Where can we find Kenneth? You want your ship? You ain't going to get her. Kenneth took her because he wanted her, and she wants him. She'd lick his boots if she could reach them. He sweet-talks her like a cheap whore, and she just laps it up. I heard him talk to her one night, cozying up to her about turning pirate. She went willing. She'll never come back to you. She got a gut full of being a slaver. She pirates for Kenneth now. She wears his colors, same as me. His eyes measured the impact of his words. Ship hated being a slaver. She was grateful to Kenneth for freeing her. She'll never want to come back to you, nor would Kenneth ransom her to you. He likes her. Says he always wanted a live ship. Now he has one. Liar! The roar burst out, not from Althea, but Paragon. You lying sack of guts. Give him to me. I'll wring the truth out of him. Paragon's words were another buffet against her. Sickened, Althea stood slowly. They touched a deeply hidden fear. She had known that Vivacia's experiences as a slaver must change her. Could it change her this much? So much that she would turn against her own family and strike out on her own with someone else? Why not? Hadn't Althea also turned away from her family with far less provocation? A horrible mixture of jealousy, disappointment, and betrayal swept through her. So must a wife feel who discovers her husband's unfaithfulness. So must a parent feel when a daughter becomes a whore. How could Vivacia have done so? And how could Althea have failed her so badly? What would become of her beautiful, misguided ship now? Could they ever be as they were before, one heart, one spirit, moving over the sea before the wind?
I feel really bad for Althea because the answer to this is no.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. And it makes me so sad because really Althea does love Vivacia, right? She loves Vivacia in her own way and does want to captain her, and that's her ship in her mind. And it is kind of taken from her because by the time they reach Vivacia, she's so bonded to Wintrow that they're just never going to have that bond again. She's already bonded. And I don't know, I just feel really bad that Althea missed out on this and Kyle was successful in his attempt to sever her tie with the ship. It's just really sad. And I feel bad for her here too, because she's really facing that fear of hey, I'm sailing a live ship that is my family ship. Uh-oh. Like, maybe my ship did turn her back on the family.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Paragon is ranting on in the background while she's thinking these thoughts here, saying that, like, I'll bring the truth out of him and I'd make him speak true of that bastard Kenneth.
And then this part makes me extra mad at Brashen. Maybe it didn't for you. But as Paragon's ranting, Althea is not really paying attention, and then Brashen takes her elbow and says, "You look as if you will faint," he said in a low voice. "Can you walk away? Keep your dignity in front of the crew?" His words were her final undoing. She wrenched free of him. "Don't touch me," she snarled lowly. "Dignity," she cautioned herself. Dignity. But it was all she could do to keep from shrieking at him like a fishwife. He stepped back from her, appalled, and she saw the briefest flash of anger deep in his dark eyes. She drew herself up, fighting for control. And then fighting, she suddenly knew, to separate her emotions from Paragon's. What is Brashen? I get that in his mind, he just doesn't want her to embarrass herself in front of the crew, which she wouldn't want.
Right. That's where I'm coming from with this. Like, dignity is maybe a bad word choice, but like that's kind of what she's been struggling and talked to him about, right?
Yeah.
For the past chapters. It's just like they don't respect me. They think I'm just a woman and not worthy of leading them. And then the last update was like they're finally starting to respect me after the fight, you know?
Right.
So he comes to her like, "Hey, can you not faint? Like, are you good to walk away?"
Yeah, but he doesn't say it like that. He's like, the way he says it is just so infuriating and so condescending. And I know he doesn't mean it to be condescending, but it is. Like, "Ooh, you look a little pale. You sure you can make it without making a fool of yourself?" It just, especially because she's already upset with him, it's not great. And I don't know. It like drives me crazy. And I get, okay, it's hard because I get that he cares about her and he's doing this because he cares. But also, he makes such a big deal about how, like, nobody can know we have feelings for each other and it wouldn't be appropriate to, like, date or do whatever. And then he goes around treating her like it's his girlfriend. And that undermines her as a first mate. Like, it just does. And he's not thinking of it like that, clearly, but it does. Him treating her like that, other people don't know it's because he has deep feelings for her. It just looks like it's because she's a woman. And that's how Althea's taking it. And I get that there's more feeling behind it, but I don't know. It's just really frustrating.
So she turns her back towards the prisoner and the figurehead for a fraction of an instant too late. Lavoy had the pirate to his feet and against the railing. The threats were twin, that Lavoy would simply push him overboard, or that the mate would strike him. The man's face was reddened on one cheek. There had at least been one blow. Amber had hold of Lavoy's drawn-back arm. She suddenly looked surprisingly tall. For a woman so willowy to have the strength to hold Lavoy's arm back surprised Althea. Amber's expression seemed to have turned Lavoy to stone. The look on Lavoy's face was not fear. Whatever he saw in Amber's eyes moved him beyond fear. Too late, Althea saw the real threat. Paragon twisted to his full limit, and he grabs the prisoner. The pirate screamed, and Amber's shout of, "Oh, Paragon, no, 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 no," cut through his cries. Amber turned away from them, clenching him in his hands, hunching his shoulders over the stolen prisoner like a child devouring a stolen sweetmeat. He was fiercely muttering something to the hapless man as he shook him back and forth like a rag doll. But all Althea could hear was Amber's pleading, "Paragon, please, Paragon." Brashen's trying to command him to return the man back to the deck, and Althea's clutching the railings, screaming no. But the figurehead isn't hearing anything. And near her, Lavoy watched, his teeth white in a gritted grimace, his eyes strangely avid. Paragon darted his face down close to the man, he clutched tight in both hands. For one horrific instant, Althea feared he would bite his head off. Instead, he froze as if listening intently. Then, "No," he shrieked. "Kenneth never said that. He never said he always dreamed of having his own live ship. You lie! You lie!" He shook the man back and forth. Althea heard the snapping of bones. The man screamed, and Paragon suddenly flung him away. His body cartwheeled in the bright sunlight and then bit into the flashing sea abruptly. He was gone. And everyone is just kind of dull and they like, "Oh, ship.
Oh, ship, Brashen groaned deep beside her.
Oh, ship."
Oh, ship. Yeah, not great. And we know that
He has such an emotional reaction to this because Kenneth is and Paragon are bonded.
yeah,
Or at
and
least they were.
Kenneth threw him away and
Yeah.
told him to die.
Mm-hmm.
So why would he want a live ship
Yeah.
if he had one and tried to kill him?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel really bad for Paragon because that's pretty rough. Feel worse for the guy he kills,
Right.
but I do feel bad for Paragon in this moment because he's really vulnerable as is, especially with all of Lavoy's prodding and whatever. But I don't know.
He turns back to them and says, in a frightened and defiant boy voice, "I made him tell. Divvytown. We'll find Kenneth in Divvytown. He always liked Divvytown." "Well, that was what you wanted, wasn't it? To find out where Kenneth was? That's all I did. I made him talk." "That you did, laddie," Lavoy observed gruffly. Even he seemed daunted by Paragon's action. In a quiet voice, pitched only for humans, he added, "I didn't believe he'd do it."
Yes, you did, Amber contradicted him flatly. She stared at Lavoy with eyes that seared. That was why you put the man within Paragon's reach, so he could take him, because you want him dead like the other prisoners. Amber turned her head suddenly to stare at the tattooed ones of the crew who stood silently watching. You were in on it. You knew what he would do, but you did nothing. That's what he brought out in you. The worst of what slavery could have done to you. Her glance snapped back to the mate. You're a monster, Lavoy. Not just for what you did to that man, but for what you've wakened in the ship. You're trying to make him a brute like yourself. With a jerk of his head, Paragon turned his main face away from Amber's word. So you don't like me anymore? Well, I don't care. If I have to be weak so you can like me, then I don't need you to like me. So there. For him to revert to such childishness immediately after he had brutally killed a man paralyzed Althea with horror. What was this ship? Amber's not having it. She's tired of holding her tongue.
Yeah.
And she is letting Lavoy have it. And not just Lavoy, but all his little cronies that are going along with it. And she is saying, enough of this game. You're doing this. You're not innocent. And you're a piece of trash. And honestly, good for you, Amber. It's about time somebody did something.
And she speaks to the tattooed as well, saying, like, he's bringing out the worst in you, too. And Lavoy answers saying, like, I did nothing. And he addresses his words to the tattooed. Everyone saw what happened. None of it was my doing. The ship took it into his own hands in more ways than one. So Lavoy's like, I'm innocent. I'm not manipulating anybody. I'm not bringing out the bad side of anybody.
Yeah. You saw, I just had him by the railing.
Mm-hmm.
It's so annoying. This again is like stoking my anger at Brashen because Lavoy is able to be so brazen and so out in the open with what he's doing because Brashen continuously refuses to do anything about it. He just stays silent to keep that distance between captain and first mate. Heaven forbid first mate get taken down a peg. I don't know.
He says shut up to everybody, steps forward and says, we'll be making for Divvytown with all speed. The performance of this crew during the attack was abysmal. There will be additional drill for officers as well as crew. We'll have each man knowing his place and duty and acting promptly on that knowledge. He looked older and wearier than Althea had ever seen him. He turned back to the figurehead. Paragon, your punishment for disobeying my orders is isolation. No one is to speak to the ship without my leave. No one, he repeated as Amber took a breath to protest. No one is to even be on the foredeck unless duty demands it. Now clear it, all of you, and get back to your tasks. Now. Brashen stood silently on the foredeck as his crew silently ebbed away, back to deck or bunk as their watches commanded. Althea, too, walked away from him. Right now, she did not know him at all. How could he have let all that happen? Didn't he see what Lavoy was doing? What he was doing to the ship? And Althea has to leave with that barb, but like early on in the chapter, she's she's straight up defending what Brashen has to do as a captain.
Yeah, she was like,
and then it's like, I'm mad at Brashen now. So what is he doing?
To be fair, this is the most brazen that I think Lavoy has been. I think,
yeah, true.
In this moment, it's pretty clear that it's the wrong choice to do nothing. At least, I mean, maybe it's fueled by her anger at him and just wanting to be defiant, but it's the right opinion, in my opinion.
And we switch over to Brashen's point of view here. And he's saying that he's hurt, not just from his slash across the ribs from the sword, but because Althea had looked at him with absolute loathing. He could not fathom why. His liveship, his pride, his Paragon had killed with a bestial savagery that sickened him. He had not thought the ship capable of such a thing. He was almost certain now that Lavoy was lining up not just men, but the ship himself to support the mate in a mutiny. Amber was right, though he wished she had not spoken it aloud. For reasons he did not completely grasp, Lavoy had seen to it that all their prisoners died. It was overwhelming to him, yet he must deal with all that, and never show, not even by a twitch of a facial muscle, that it bothered him. He was the captain. This was the price. Just when he most wanted to confront Lavoy or take Althea in his arms or demand that Paragon explain to him what had just happened, instead, he had to square his shoulders and stand straight. Keep his dignity. For the sake of his crew and his command, he must feel nothing. He stood on the foredeck and watched them all obey him. Lavoy went with resentful backwards glance. Althea moved awkwardly, her spirit broken. He hoped the other women would have the sense to give her some privacy, for a time. Amber was the last to leave the foredeck. She paused as if she would speak. He met her eyes and silently shook his head. Paragon must not think that anyone opposed Brashen's order to isolate him. He must feel the disapproval was universal. As soon as Amber was off the deck, Brashen followed her. He spoke no word of parting to the ship. He wondered if Paragon even noticed it. Mr. Stoic.
Mr. Stoic, indeed. I am really frustrated with his explanation of why he's doing nothing and this whole, like, I wanted to confront Lavoy or take Althea in my arms or demand Paragon explain himself, but instead I have to square my shoulders and stand straight, keep my dignity. For the sake of his crew and his command, he must feel nothing. But why does he think that? Why does he think that's what a good captain does? Like, in this moment, you think the right thing to do is to pretend like you feel nothing and you don't care? Like, I just don't get it. I don't understand why he thinks that projects strength. It, to me, projects weakness and lack of power that he can't stand up to Lavoy. Like, he's literally the one in charge. Why can't he? I get that there's a whole, well, if you undermine the first mate, then everybody comes to him with their problems. First mate isn't doing his job. You're not undermining somebody who is trying their best. Like, it just, I don't know. It's really frustrating. And I just, seriously, I'm like, in what world is that a good choice?
Probably examples that he's had of other captains. Maybe Ephron as well had that distance. Acted like he didn't care, and Brashen was the first mate that had to do everything. Maybe that's why. Maybe he doesn't want to confront Lavoy because that forces the crew to pick sides then, and it forces a confrontation that he's hoping, maybe delusionally hoping, will just get pushed away and not happen at all.
I
don't know.
Yeah, I was also thinking maybe it's from the examples, especially of Ephron on other ships, but then also on those other ships, was there ever so clearly a mutiny brewing? Because in that case, do you think those captains would be silent and do nothing?
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes me upset, is that I don't think he's acting like a captain. I think he's waiting for somebody to give him the command in this, in my opinion. Like, that's what it feels like. He's like, oh, I have to be stoic. I can't do this. No, you don't. You make the rules. You're literally in charge.
Right.
And I don't know. Because I think what frustrates me about this is like there's this whole conversation that goes on he's the better captain. He's the better choice for captain over Althea. And I think Althea definitely has growing up to do and isn't a perfect captain. I'm not trying to say that. But I do think that sometimes it gets overlooked that Brashen isn't a good captain either, at least not at first. Like, he's not a bad captain. I'm not going to say that. But I do think that he has a lot of flaws too. And that to me, his flaws as captain are pretty similar to Althea's flaws. And it's a little frustrating that, like,
I don't know about
he
that.
gets a pass. I don't know.
Brashen has proved that he has had more foresight and planning about Paragon, about the preparations, about crewmates, about how aware he is of things and how he's willing to like think on things. But I think the stoicism is from examples, and that lack of action would be completely fine on a trading vessel or one that works well together. But on something like this, I do agree with you that Althea would have taken action by now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think all the other stuff, Brashen's a better captain, which is why they work well together later on as like partners. But yeah, I don't know. It is frustrating to see him not do much, but in his points of view, he's aware much more so than Althea of what things are happening. Because Amber and Althea are just talking about like, oh, they're, rousing up some violence. We don't like what he's doing. But Brashen is almost positive that he's actually turning the ship and people for a mutiny. Like there's an actual plan in place.
Right.
So Brashen is aware of things. He's just not taking any action, which is, very frustrating.
Fair. Maybe I was being a little dramatic by saying that they're similar flaws. But I don't know. I think, and to be fair, Brashen's a little bit older than Althea and has had
way more leading experience.
Yeah, more leading experience and more experience in general actually working on a ship. Althea's had 1 year.
Yeah. And Brashen has had what, like 10
to 15.
And maybe we don't really know for sure, but at least 5 is first mate on a live ship.
Yeah. Well, if we think about, he was kicked out at what, 14, 15?
Yeah.
And he's like 28 now.
Something like that.
And he's basically been sailing that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I get it. And like, obviously Althea has been on a ship longer than 1 year, but like she's not had to be an actual sailor for longer than 1 year.
Right.
And obviously doesn't know all the intricacies that go on board. And so, yeah, she definitely has a little bit more of a blind spot and more growing to do. But
she has more self-confidence than Brashen in like certain actions to take, which again is why they complement each other.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. They do play that. But it does, I don't know, it just bothers me in this moment, especially where it was bothering me the end of last book. Like when we started on this journey, it was bothering me. And now we're, almost to the halfway point of this book. And I'm like, okay, do something. And I know what happens. Like, I know it all works out. I know it's going to be fine. But it still makes me so angry. Like, I just want to shake him a little bit. Maybe not as hard as Paragon shook that kid, but.
Speaking of.
Yeah, we're in Paragon's point of view now to end the chapter.
He surreptitiously wipes his hands again down the bow. Blood was such clinging stuff, so clinging and so rich with memories. He fought against absorbing the man he had killed, but in the end, the blood had its way. It soaked into his wizardwood hands, rich, red, and fraught with emotions. Terror and pain were the strongest. Well, how had the man expected to die once he took up piracy? He'd brought it on himself. It was not Paragon's fault. The man should have talked when Lavoy told him to, then Lavoy would kill him gently. Besides, the pirate had lied. He had said that Kennett loved Vivacia, that he often said he'd always wanted a live ship for his very own. Worse, he said that Vivacia had bonded to Kennett. She could not. She was not his family. So the man had lied, and he had died. Yeah, so Paragon is very, very upset with that story that he's convincing himself is not true. And he recognizes that people are mad with him. Brashen was very angry with him. It was Brashen's own fault he was angry, because Brashen could not understand a simple thing like killing someone who had lied to you. There were many things he was discovering that Brashen did not understand. But Lavoy did. Lavoy came to him and talked to him and told him sea tales and called him laddie. And he understood. He understood that Paragon had to be as he was, that everything he had ever done, he'd had to do. Lavoy told him he had nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to regret. He agreed that people had pushed Paragon into everything he had ever done. Brashen and Althea and Amber all wanted him to be like them. They wanted him to pretend he had no past, no pasts at all. Be how they wanted him to be, or they wouldn't like him. But he couldn't. There were too many feelings inside him that he knew they wouldn't like. That didn't mean he could stop feeling them. Too many voices, telling him bad memories over and over and over, but in tiny little voices he could not quite hear. Tiny little blood voices whimpering from the past. What was he supposed to do about them? They were never silent. Not really. Oh,
We know now how Lavoy is turning Paragon to his side.
yeah. Building him up, basically. Giving him self-confidence, saying that you weren't at fault for anything. You don't need to worry about anything in the past because you were right.
Yeah. Just the same way as Kennet is doing to Vivacia. It's
everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Which is not how it needs to be. And I think that's the difference is Lavoy doesn't care about Paragon ultimately, right?
Right.
And I mean, even if he did, pretending like every problem you've ever encountered was none of your fault, not a healthy or good way to look at life. And Amber and Althea and Brashen aren't going to say that to him because they care about Paragon and want him to be able to grow from that.
Yeah.
They want him to take accountability for his actions and continue to grow instead of acting like a child and pretending like he would never do anything wrong. Not their little boy. So it's just frustrating to read. And it's understandable why it works.
Oh, yeah. From his point of view, it's just like, of course, like, you're a precious little boy, Paragon, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You were pushed into a lot of things. You had a horrible past.
And it's sad because that's all Paragon wants. He just wants to be accepted. Yeah. And he doesn't have a good enough understanding of what healthy relationships look like to understand that real love and real people caring about you looks more like what Amber does for him than what Lavoy is doing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's maybe the saddest part is that he is so easily taken by Lavoy because Lavoy's using sweet words and saying exactly what he wants to hear, regardless of if it's what he needs to hear.
Mm-hmm. Paragon is saying, like, I don't care if they don't talk to me. I can not talk and not move for years at a time. Besides, Lavoy probably won't listen to that order anyways. So that's fine. He let the other part of himself grow stronger. Did they really think they could punish him and still expect him to sail blithely to Divvytown for them? They'd see. He crossed his arm on his chest and sailed blindly on. So that sentence, he let the other part of himself grow stronger. I personally think that's one of the dragons that he's letting grow stronger, because it immediately comes back into a vicious revenge. They can't treat me like this.
Yeah.
I'm too proud for them. Like, you think there won't be consequences for how you're treating me? And to me, that seems like very dragon-like.
Okay, yeah.
So that's what I think on that.
To be fair, it kind of sounds a lot like Kennet too, so.
Right, but remember, it was Kennet's hurt when he was a boy that he got locked away.
Yeah.
Sounds like Kennet now.
True.
Yeah, very frustrating chapter from multiple points of view.
Agreed. There's a section at the end of this chapter, like half a page of blank page in my book, and I just wrote, I am so mad at Brashen and Althea. Why do they think Brashen doing nothing is a good idea? In what world? I just like went off. So which I do sometimes when I have room to just rant in the book, but I don't know. It's a good chapter. We get a lot of information that's important, a lot of context, and a lot of sad stuff happening.
Yeah. And the characters are learning about where to converge on Kennet, and
Yeah.
plot lines are slowly starting to coincide. So we can kind of see where things are going in the book now.
And we're trudging up that hill.
Yeah, only chapter 9, so
True.
we've got, another 20 chapters or so. I haven't seen how the end is or how many chapters are in the book. I'm guessing like 35 to 40. You're checking right now?
Yep. I opened directly to the epilogue, but that doesn't count in this moment because it doesn't have a number. Oh my goodness. The last chapter might be very long. Here it is. 40. So technically
40?
41 with epilogue.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're on 9.
Is
Almost a fourth of the way through.
There's a prologue too, though, so 42.
42. We're almost a fourth of the way through, though, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, probably be another year. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. Please share your thoughts on the Althea and Brashen and your sides and what you relate to, because as we mentioned before, everybody reads these books differently, and there is a lot to relate to in both of those points of view.
Yeah.
So let us know.
I think it'd be really interesting to know, like, if you are frustrated at all, and if you are, who makes you more frustrated? Like,
yeah, I mean, both of them make me frustrated.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
So email us at isfitshappy@gmail.com, or you can message us or comment on any of our posts on social media. You can find us at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you call it, Reddit, Threads, all of those, and YouTube as well. So please let us know what you're thinking. Thank you so much.
We look forward to hearing from you. Now it's time for our favorite portion, what you guys have brought to us.
And I want to start with a comment that I missed for our last episode, actually. But this was commented about 20 days ago from this recording on Spotify from A Lapage. So thank you very much for commenting on this episode. It was episode 209, part 1 of chapter 6, where we were talking about how dragons eat deer and,
how the memories are affected.
Exactly. And you were talking about if the serpents ate a lot of fish, it would maybe make them dull eventually.
Right.
So A Lapage also kind of chimes in and agrees with the previous other message that I believe we talked about. And I missed this one in all that hubbub and reading stuff. But they agree that with a dragon, it probably doesn't even they don't even feel a drop of the deer's memory in them, because with their daily gained memories, first of all, it's not even going to be anything compared to everything else that they have lived through, plus the silver that they drink.
True.
It's not going to change who they are or anything like that. So dragons eating deer doesn't affect anything, but serpents eating fish might, because they don't get the silver. They're not supposed to be in that form for very long.
Right.
They don't have all of their memories readily on hand. So that's still up in the air. That could happen.
Right. And I'm not trying to say that it would happen after 100 years even. I think the serpents have been swimming around for 1,000 years. And I think that's why it would affect them, not necessarily just a normal lifespan or even 2 or 3 lifespans.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. But
Thank you very much for making the comment on Spotify there.
Yeah. And then we'll go to Facebook, where we have 2 comments from Ellen on episode 212, which is chapter 8, Lords of the Three Realms. Ellen wants to know about our thoughts on the Memory Stone road construction. How do you think they imbued the road stones with be a road? Did they have special skilled construction workers / overseers that programmed the road? Did they have to block the manual workers from accidentally putting memories or other thoughts into the stone? Did they have to have workers impervious to the power of Memory Stone? Or did they partially forge all the manual workers into only having road in their minds? I know it'll be just speculation, but which theory do you think is most probable?
What do you think?
I don't know. I feel like there had to have been like a workshop where they made the road stones. And then I imagine there were workers who placed the stone and they wore like special gloves or something. Because,
Yeah, we know from the memories that they always wore gloves working with the silver
right.
in general and things like that. So I'm sure they were very careful with these. But yeah, I agree with you that they made them somewhere else and kind of shipped it over there.
And to be fair, if you're a construction worker dealing with memory stone, I'm sure you're a highly trained construction
Yeah.
worker. Because if you think about it, I'm sure that the memory of them building the road would be captured in the stone.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, wouldn't that be funny? You're a construction worker, you come home to your loving wife or husband, and they're like, "Oh, honey, how was your day?" And you're like, I don't know. And they're like, "Well, what did you do?"
Like,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this kind of stone is completely different from what we know in this day and age as working with memory stone. And I don't
Right.
think it like sucked in your memories really,
Yeah.
because why would the Elderlings build a city out of it if it was going to rob people of the memories? I think it just
Right.
it holds the memories of like typical days, but it
Yeah.
doesn't like steal them from people.
Yeah.
They have a special way of constructing it or doing it, but we don't know what that is. It's not like the stone dragons.
Right. I think that's an interesting thing to think on too, because if you think about it, if every single day you spent in the city is being captured by the stone, which we know it is because it replays for the people that visit,
Mm-hmm.
then are these people just living their lives not knowing anything that's happening day
Right,
to day?
exactly.
So something has to be different. I don't
Mhm.
know. I don't know what though.
And even the way that, some of these elderlings captured their memories into like memory cubes
Yeah.
and like diaries, they're not taking the memories and putting them into the cubes. They're duplicating them, right?
Yeah.
They're not stealing their own memories and putting them away because I don't know. That feels very extreme. And it
Yeah.
feels like the elderling magic and the elderling way of constructing and their science was a little bit more nuanced than that. A lot of intention.
Yeah. And I think if you think about it, the stone dragons are pretty unique
Mm-hmm.
because you're trying to put yourself in a dragon that will live forever, like in a stone
Yeah.
version of a dragon that lives forever. Whenever you're building a road, you're not trying to put yourself into that. You're just building a road. And so I can see how the processes are completely different because,
Or a building even,
or yeah,
Yeah,
like
whatever it is.
I feel like the process of making a stone dragon is completely different from telling that stone to become a road instead. Like, I don't think that would take something from you. And I think if you think about it like that, as like they're two separate things using the same material, it makes like it helps kind of differentiate. And again, like that's probably lost to time because the people died out who figured it out. But I think it makes more sense than all these people just losing
Yeah.
their whole life by living in the city.
Or having a special class of workers that are very valuable that aren't affected by skill or dragon speech, which would leave them in a very lowly social standing because their whole city is revolving around, talking to dragons and being
Right.
blessed by that. But then you have to have these workers that can't feel that to put in the
Yeah.
stone otherwise. I don't know. It just feels a little bit backwards to me. So there has to be something that we're missing here.
Yeah.
Some way of actually constructing it that doesn't really affect it anymore.
Yeah.
But
But
thank you. That's a cool thought.
yeah. And it also kind of ties into Ellen's other thought, which is when Tintaglia flies over the cocooning grounds and remembers how the cocoons were made by the black memory stone stand and dragon saliva, it makes me think again on the similarities between wizardwood and the stone dragons. Both are actually made with memory stone and memories, but the wizard wood were not supposed to be animated by itself. It's just supposed to be a data bank for the memories to be downloaded as soon as possible. I wonder if the dragons had to purposefully put their memories in the sand in the cocooning process, or if the memories are just automatically they just automatically came along with the saliva.
I don't remember. I feel like there's a passage that Tintaglia briefly talks about how exhausting it was to be the only dragon to help Cocoon.
Yes.
And I feel like she might have mentioned something there, but I don't quite remember it. I feel like there's intention behind it.
Yeah, I think there is a intention of sharing memory in the saliva. So I think it's like it's a special situation where there is memories being transferred.
Just like we were talking about with serpents, how they have different toxins, and I believe that's some memories are involved in that. And they can pick and choose which toxins, aka which,
right,
things are using. I think there's intention with what Tintaglia was doing.
Right. And so I think that's part of it. I also think it's really interesting to compare the stone dragon to the live ships, because if you think about it, stone dragons could continue to live on as actual living beings if they constantly got blood and memories. And you know who constantly gets blood and memories? Live ships every couple years when somebody dies.
Yeah.
So, and they have enough baseline memories because it was the memories of an actual being that's millions of years old, apparently. Maybe, who knows? We don't know the timeline of this world. It had millions and millions of memories to go with. It wasn't just a stone that got 4 people's memories to make it come alive. I don't know. I think that's a really interesting thing to think about, and a good shout to telling us that, or to pointing out that they are
linking more similarities together. Yeah.
So thank you, Ellen, for those thoughts. A fun little thought exercise for us.
And lastly, we had a message on Instagram from Peculiar Ponies, and they mentioned a couple things here. We got some pictures of horses, which is great.
Of Relpda.
Yep.
And her future husband, Little Swift.
Peculiar Ponies does say Spit would have been more lore accurate, but that's just mean for such a cute little colt. Which, yeah, I agree. Spit is like a maybe not very nice name.
Sorry, I said it was pictures of Relpda and Little Swift. I think it's just pictures of Relpda. But Little Swift will be the husband, which is fun.
But Peculiar Ponies also is talking about Rainwild Chronicles. I think we had a couple questions about things. And they have been listening to Rainwild Chronicles audiobooks and going through that and trying to kind of catch up with those questions and the lore that are in there, because we don't remember anything.
No,
it's been a while.
Years
for
away.
Us. Yeah, that's years away. We've had questions about that. So they are speaking here kind of about how families were raised with the old Elderlings. And that's kind of the first comment that they want to make. We were talking about how old Elderlings maybe were different, or they're a homogenous kind of race, because I think we were talking about golden skin.
Right.
That description. And Peculiar Ponies chimes in and says that they think that the old Elderlings also needed a lot of supervision, because they mention, the books mention them needing approval from their dragon if they wanted to have children, so their changes could be guided. However, every dragon closely related could help shape the Elderlings, so it might have been a burden on a family of dragons instead of one individual dragon. The reason why they can't help Malta's child without Tintaglia is because none of the new dragons are related to her. And yes, the new Elderlings aren't only gold, so we have some examples that, the new ones also have different skin, which we thought.
Rapskull's red.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah, so some are orange.
Yeah, there's different colors there. So, yeah, we were trying to make sense of that descriptor that Tintaglia said that the old race were golden skinned,
And, I was thinking about it, maybe with the idea that it's all the family of dragons helps to push the deformities or whatever. I don't know. The physicalities of these Elderlings. Maybe that could be part of it. Like,
all of them combined kind of ended up being gold.
Yeah, or they like made the conscious choice of like,
Yeah.
our elderlings will be gold, and so the lineage that she has, even though we know that she doesn't choose that for her own, but maybe when it's multiple dragons working together, it ends up with the gold, or maybe they can choose to make it different colors. Who knows? But I think it is still an interesting detail.
Yeah, definitely. And then more on the Rainwild Chronicles, other questions that we kind of had, or just general thoughts that Peculiar Ponies wanted to chime in with, was the names of some of the serpents and what dragons that they turn into or how they end up. So I think we've talked about this before, but Sisarqua turns into Centaura, and Sisarqua is a serpent that we learn about in Rainwild Chronicles. They're not mentioned here in this trilogy.
Right.
However, they are in Malkin's Tangle. And then Caesarea becomes Tarmin's legs and tail. Kalaro is Kalo, obviously, and Malkin turns into Mercor, which we knew those ones for sure.
Oh, yeah. And then there's also a little bit of clarification on the weirdness that is the Vestrit family tree.
Oh, yeah.
So apparently, Rainwild's Book 3, first 3 hours, Keffria is mentioned as Malta's mother. Selden mentions Chalcedonian father. Last 3 hours, Ephron is Malta's dad. Keffria and Ronica mentioned only a few minutes before them naming Ephron. And then in Book 4, within the first hour, Selden mentions his father being Kyle. Kyle is from Shellport and Chalced. Book keeps mentioning Selden, Malta, and Wintro being siblings, with Keffria as mother, mostly in the bird post messages. Althea is mentioned as an aunt.
So yeah, it sounds like Rainwild Chronicles pretty much have it all correct except for naming Ephron as her father. Because I think they're talking about, we'll name the kid Ephron after my father.
Yes, yeah.
Right, and that can just be kind of passed off as a typo or an editing mistake of its grandfather instead. Which is also weird that she would name...
After the grandfather she didn't care about?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
That's one of like, oh yeah, Malta's changed so much. Like that's not believable.
No.
She did not like Ephron.
She literally didn't care he died. Like,
no,
she was kind of like, finally we can party again.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, it's good to know that the rest of the Rainwild Chronicles seems to be okay, and it's really just Fitz and the Fool, the last trilogy, that really messes it up.
Yeah.
I wanna get the ebook and just search for Keffria to see if she's mentioned at all in that trilogy.
I know, poor Keffria. But yeah, so thank you, Peculiar Ponies. Thank you to everybody who writes in. We always appreciate hearing from you guys, seeing what your thoughts are, if you have any theories that you want to run by us and the rest of the group. And we really enjoy just having a little chat with you guys.
Yeah.
So, thank you, and we'll see you next week.